Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Damage Report Lockdown Edition. Indeed, a new week. Hey, we made it, which we can't necessarily take for granted. Not all of us anyway. But I'm excited that you're joining me here. We got a full packed show, and as you perhaps have already grown accustomed to, it being Monday, we bring to you now Francesca Fiorentini. Welcome back to the show.
What's up, John?
How's it going? Glad to have you here.
It's good to be here once again in my home where
Still there.
I can't leave. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Can't go on a minimal hike. Can't even touch real dirt without like some sign telling me I can't.
And it's, against the rules.
Government telling me I need to stay in my house.
Yeah. So you're, I assume, joking there, but we are going to be talking about a few different groups that basically are actually approaching the lockdown advice, if not orders, in some parts of the country in that particular way. If you are watching this and you don't know, Francesca is the host of Newsbroke, which is back. Where can they see that?
youtube.com/AJ+, which is where all of the new episodes are. And so this week we had an episode about how Trump and all of his advisors mostly just care about the economy and their stock markets and portfolios going up. So they want us back to work / they're trying to kill us.
Yeah, it's very like Soylent Green. It's like, we need you to be ground into a paste if that's what it takes for us to do well economically again.
Yes, absolutely.
We're not going to eat you yet, but just saying.
We just want you there. I mean, listen, once again, with Elysium, which absolutely is being built right now, they're going to need a lot of fuel.
Yeah. Underrated movie. Or properly rated. I don't know. I only watched it once, but it was good for that one time. I don't know if you saw it. Anyway, okay.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
The one time.
One time was enough. I like Matt Damon, but not enough to watch it twice. Now, through the course of this show, what are we going to be talking about? Well, a military report put together earlier this year, laying out a course, potentially, for coronavirus that, it looks like it's following. The Surgeon General has a warning for the country. Donald Trump's got some snake oil, if you're thirsty. And let's see, how are some churches responding to lockdown orders? And Hillary Clinton, what does she think about people trying to force candidates out of primaries before they're ready to go? You might be surprised. So anyway, that'll be a little bit of fun. We're going to close out the show with that. If you are already in the chat, as indeed about 1,000 of you are, please hit the like button, subscribe to the notifications if you haven't already, and just basically let people know that we're doing this. We can get more of a conversation going. And don't worry, when the bots start flooding in, I am going to be playing a little bit of defense. So hopefully we'll be able to keep control of them this week. But we're going to try. Okay, with that, why don't we jump into the news? The White House took forever to at least pretend to take coronavirus seriously, but that does not mean that everyone in the government, everyone who is in a position to safeguard us, wasn't taking it seriously. In fact, the U.S. Army was. Back in early February, they assessed that the coronavirus could kill as many as 150,000 Americans. This is a document that was put together on February 3rd, like 5 or 6 weeks before Trump was talking seriously about coronavirus. They had a, quote, black swan assessment that's effectively like a worst-case scenario, that 80 million Americans could be infected, 15 to 25 million could require care, 300,000 to 500,000 could require hospitalization, and 80,000 to 150,000 could die. And so I think it's important to remind you that that was put together on February 3rd as a worst case scenario. And what Trump has labeled as evidence that they would have done a great job has potentially more deaths than what they thought the worst case scenario would be on February 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced that Trump doesn't know that less is more in this case. Like, I'm not convinced he knows that fewer deaths is good. But I mean, to me, when the U.S. Army is giving these precautions and these warnings early February, is absolutely unconscionable that we didn't take action before this. This should be the question and the only question that Trump receives in every single press conference, over and over and over again. Is it true you were told February 3rd that coronavirus could kill as many as 150,000 Americans? Yes or no? Next question. Same thing. That's it. I just want accountability on one thing.
Exactly. And it looks like I mean, I think his numbers are down overall in terms of people's evaluation of how he's doing, which makes sense. 1,000+ people are dying literally every single day. We'll give you updated numbers on that. Actually, I had written down in the production document that 339,596 cases had already been logged. But that's from an hour ago. So it's like 15,000 cases, more than that already. So bear that in mind. But yeah, they put that together on February 3rd. In late February, Trump was still tweeting things like, the coronavirus is very much under control in the USA. A few days later, he said the number of cases was going down and would be close to zero in a few days. And the weird thing is, he spent the first few weeks of talking about coronavirus saying, I shut down travel, it was very strong, and we're getting a lot of credit for saving lives by doing that. Which, as the days have gone by, has always seemed like a really weird thing to say as the case count continues to skyrocket. But just yesterday, his son wrote that thank God they took early aggressive action. There's more than 1/3 people that have it. How could you still be patting yourself on the back when clearly the efforts that you took did not succeed? Or if in your view they did succeed, then what's the alternative case? You think that there would be 50 million people already that would be infected? What weird perspective to have to think that the limited stuff that Trump did as he continued to play down the disease was successful in literally any way.
No, absolutely. I mean, and this is the point. There is no number that Trump will not claim victory around. Literally 2, 3, 4 million people could die, and he'll be like, "Listen, at least it wasn't like 5 Hiroshimas." Like, you know what I mean? He doesn't. He will always claim victory.
I think that would still be more than 5 Hiroshimas, but I get your point.
I know it would be like 12 Hiroshimas.
He wouldn't know.
He wouldn't know. I don't know. I'm not the president. But what I do know is that there will be a constant barrage of misinformation from here until November. And it's like, how do you play it? Like, how do we actually like have conversations with people that brings them back to reality? How do journalists cover this accurately? I've been constantly wondering, like, where's Tom Steyer's money right now? Where's Bloomberg's money right now? Can we get at least a few ads on television that are just like, this is a lie? I know there have been some, right? But I want to see constantly, like, we need to change the discussion. This is actually life or death.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was going to spend all that money, remember? And then he just decided he liked having the money more than spending the money. I think that's what it was. Now, really fast, we have been pointing out for a while now what Trump said to deceive the public and to waste time on coronavirus. But I want to be very clear that obviously what he was doing was at least as important. I think that what the president says is important because I think a lot of people follow his lead, including governors who still haven't put lockdown orders into effect. But I also want you to know what the government was doing and was not doing when, again, the Army was warning about this Black Swan assessment back on February 3rd. So let's see. On Sunday, the AP reported that the government largely failed to place bulk orders of N95 respirator masks, ventilators, and other medical equipment vital to those treating coronavirus patients until mid-March, according to federal purchasing contracts. The Washington Post reported that the Trump administration received its first briefing about the outbreak in China on January 3rd. So, they waited 10 weeks, at least, probably slightly more than that, 10 to 11 weeks to place bulk orders. And the thing is, like I just criticized their travel ban, and they keep saying that worked, even though, thousands and thousands of people have died. The idea that you were going to completely stop it from getting in the United States, considering how contagious it is, was never going to work. What you needed to do was prepare for it to get here. And that they did not do. They literally wasted months. I've been saying that colloquially, but no, they have literally wasted months before doing what they needed to do, which was accept that it's going to get here, accept that it's going to spread, but make sure that we have the resources and equipment necessary to weather the storm once it hits.
I mean, I can't even, like, that goes into the, like, cannot compute because it makes me so angry column, of which there's a lot of information, like the fact that people are bidding on respirators and bidding on masks, and that we are sending masks abroad, like to the highest bidder and outbidding other countries. The whole thing is just, I mean, it is the free market gone haywire. And I think, in terms of, I mean, I don't know. I just think like Trump in February, how many times did he go golfing? Where was he?
Hmm.
Right? Like, if this is actually a war, where were you? And the US military, and the US Army, like, as much as I don't believe in militarism around the world, and as much as I think we need to redirect so much money from our military into actual public services, they issue these warnings all the time. And another warning that they have issued for years now is about climate change.
Yes, I was hoping
They
that's what you're going to say.
Yes, and it's like suddenly, we're supposed to love the military, honor them, honor veterans, and if you don't, you are an anti-American, whatever. You're horrible. And yet, when it comes to the warnings that they are issuing, when it comes to their expertise, when it comes to them saying, hey, listen, it's not like, terrorism, it is climate change, it is pandemics like this that we are unprepared for, suddenly we can disrespect them all we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit more information about the slow response. Because I think, look, the worst thing that will come out of this is the fact that far more people will get sick and far more people will die. But the fact that he will also probably evade 99% of the accountability for it is pretty bad too. So the contracts that we talked about earlier, those don't require the company to begin delivering masks until the end of April. That, by the way, is after, theoretically, the pandemic will have peaked, according to some medical experts.
We hope.
We hope. I don't even know.
We're not even really seeing a plateau. So, I mean, I hope this is kind of like this is a horrible analogy, but when you're on like a hike and your friend is like, no, I swear, like we're going to reach, like there's a reservoir up there. We're going to reach the top. There's going to be a view. And you're like, no, there's not. I am sweating. It is hour 5. My sandwich has been eaten 3 hours ago. When are we getting to the top? I feel like we're on this long trek and no one is being honest with us about when we're going to get to the top.
One other thing I want to add to this is the fact that he's pitching himself as a wartime president, but also wants to imply that like we totally got this, we're going to be fine in like 2 weeks, which has always been so weird. That like this is the invisible enemy, which is terminology I think he uses to get the Q people all fired up. And then does basically nothing. And so that in terms of that leading from behind, one of the things he's been doing over the past few weeks is when governors are saying we don't have the personal protective equipment or ventilators that we need, he calls them complainers as if they should just sit idly by as their citizens die, says that they should have stocked up more, and then says that the stockpile, remember Jared Kushner a week ago said, it's our stockpile. It's not the state's stockpile. It's ours, which mimics a lot of what Trump has been saying, that we're not supposed to be doing this. We're just a backup for them. Well, what Jared Kushner said has now become one step closer to the official position of the U.S. government, because take a look at this. Until Friday morning, the website of the Department of Health and Human Services, which maintains the stockpile, read, quote, when state, local, tribal, and territorial responders request federal assistance to support their response efforts, the stockpile ensures that the right medicines and supplies get to those who need them most during an emergency. But midday Friday, hours after Kushner directly contradicted the language on the HHS website, the text was changed without explanation. Retroactively matching what Kushner said, the website no longer says states can rely on the stockpile, but now says it exists to, quote, supplement them. Wow. And so this, like, entitled, jumped-up kid who I wouldn't put in charge of literally anything is now setting the stance of the federal government on emergency preparedness by a random thing that he Zuckerberged out during, a press conference that he shouldn't have even been involved in.
Yes. And if you actually listen to that press conference and the little bit of substance that there was there, he talked about data and how much they were relying on data. And we're just relying on all the data from the hospitals to give us, which I guess is good, but only if that data gives you preparedness. What it sounded like was that they're only going to issue ventilators and masks and PPE if you can prove just how dire and desperate your situation actually is, versus if you can predict, everyone's predicting. The US Army predicted what was going to happen, right? We've been predicting and told when this will peak, how many will die. But instead, again, with the leading from behind, Kushner's saying, yeah, no, unless you can prove in your data that there's like, hundreds of people dying in your hospital, we're not going to give you anything.
Yeah.
It's like, but we're projecting how many hundreds of people are going to die. We know this because, again, of like math and science. Like, no, the data. It's got to be the data, like the after the fact data. It makes no sense.
Yeah, they seem to think like, no, it's like a woman gets carted in, needs a ventilator, and they're like, okay, call up DC. Hey, could you send another one? No, that's not how it works.
Right, exactly.
And if you're a wartime president, the soldiers don't like go on patrol, spot a terrorist, and then call up, hey, could you send me a gun? I could probably use one right about now. Within the next 15 minutes or so, maybe you could prime it. I could use a gun at some point. That's not how it works.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
We know that the next week or two is likely to be incredibly difficult, but I want you to hear it from the current Surgeon General, Vice-Admiral Jerome Adams. Here is what he had to say about what we're likely to experience.
Well, it's tragically fitting that we're talking at the beginning of Holy Week, because this is going to be the hardest and the saddest week of most Americans' lives, quite frankly. This is going to be our Pearl Harbor moment, our 9/11 moment, only it's not going to be localized. It's going to be happening all over the country, and I want America to understand that.
That was the Surgeon General saying that this is likely to be a Pearl Harbor, a 9/11, but not in one area, all over the place. That's, about as lofty language as you can use for this in terms of trying to get people ready for it.
Yeah, it's grim. I mean, I will say, though, that like 2,400 Americans died in Pearl Harbor. We're reaching 1,000 a day for this virus. More people have already died than died in 9/11. And then I'll just caution against using some of this wartime language, which we know after Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were interned.
Yep.
We know after 9/11, we launched not one, but two illegal wars on Afghanistan and then Iraq. So let's just kind of temper that kind of war talk. There is no scapegoat, as hard as Trump tries to make, whether it's China a scapegoat, Asian Americans even a scapegoat, calling this the foreign virus. Whoever he can make a scapegoat, but you can't. Where's the retaliation? The only place to retaliate against when this is all done is our privatized healthcare system and our ransacked government that's been sold for parts in the last 30 years that we need to put back together.
Exactly. Yeah. I haven't been watching him as closely, but I think he might have mostly moved on from the China virus stuff, hopefully. We'll see. I know Tucker Carlson was all over it last week and attacking immigrants and all that stuff. But so you've rightly pointed out, I would say the biggest reasons we should not necessarily be using this wartime or, sort of war rhetoric. I think another great one is that it is a scapegoat in another way too, which is if you get people to start thinking of coronavirus as a Pearl Harbor, the thing about Pearl Harbor was that it was a surprise. And this was not a surprise. This would be Pearl Harbor if Japan had started bombing itself for months, called us up and said, oh, by the way, these bombs aren't stopping at our shores. And then other countries in the region started getting bombed. And then weeks and weeks later, we were bombed. And we were just surprised that it happened. Then it would be like Pearl Harbor. No, Absolutely. We had all the warning we could have possibly hoped for. But here's the thing. When you have the Surgeon General saying, at least, we may not like the language, but he's saying this is going to be really bad, that is almost immediately undercut by Donald Trump.
Obviously, we know anyone can spread the disease, right, unwittingly.
Right.
So why even not have a few businesses open? Why not just shut everything down? There are grocery stores that are open, fast food places. Why even take a little chance? Just shut it all down temporarily.
We'll answer that question later. All I can say is that right now, things are looking really good, and opening up with a bang will be a great thing, and there's nobody going to be happier than me.
Like, the Surgeon General's like, this is going to be 9/11 for the whole country, and he says, things are looking really good. We're going to open up with a bang. Ooh. Things are looking really good. I like, he keeps saying, like, every day as the numbers get higher, he'll literally be standing next to a chart that shows our trajectory going up, worse than other countries. And he'll continually talk about how fine everything is. Like, on the day that more than 10,000 people had died, we crossed the 10,000 point, he started tweeting about how it was great that coronavirus was hurting the ad revenue of the New York Times. How is he able to weather, like, not just lying to people about the disease, but then, like, this is Nero-esque. This is, I mean, He doesn't know how to play the fiddle. That would require practice and patience, but he is doing the equivalent of fiddling by talking about nonsense constantly, like gleefully delighting over the fact that some of his enemies are being hurt by this, mocking when Mitt Romney gets infected. Like, if you think, like, if Jim Acosta or Yamiche got infected, if you don't think he would make some sort of, like, mocking, snide comment during an official presidential address, you're crazy.
Yeah,
and it doesn't seem to be hurting him.
No, it's almost like electing a sociopathic celebrity narcissist was a bad idea. Here's what I will say, though, that Trump is speaking in stock market, like Wall Street terms, because he is trying to give a sunny outlook and a sunny projection, which is what he and all of his advisors, Larry Kudlow, right, who's his chief economic advisor, Steve Mnuchin, they're all trying to say that the $2 trillion, which disproportionately does go to businesses and large corporations, will create a bounce back in the market. And that is essentially, it is a microcosm of what happens on a daily basis on Wall Street, which is all about, like, overinflating and enthusiasm based on a lie, enthusiasm based on nothing, money that doesn't exist, and then just getting people to all jump and dogpile onto that lie to then make a few people even richer. Yeah. So we're seeing that play out, but in the midst of a pandemic, that's why he is talking that way, because he wants to make sure the stock portfolios are okay, and he doesn't care with the human lives that are lost because of it.
And their next step in that mission is they're apparently talking, I think it was the Washington Post reported, they're considering next steps, and one will be a cut to the capital gains tax rate. That's what they're thinking about doing. You know, we were talking, like, about canceling rent and how, like, lots of people are going to lose their homes and be out in the street where they'll be ravaged by coronavirus. And they're like, I think day traders are being taxed at too high of a rate. I think that's the problem that we need to fix. By the way, we have shot past 350,000 cases domestically. More than 15,000 reported so far today, and it's 10:28 where I am. So just bear that in mind. But I'm curious, for people in the chat right now, Francesca and I, we talked about our concerns about using the wartime language. What do you think about that? Is it necessary to get through to people the severity of what this is going to happen in terminology that they're used to? Or is it a dodge? And is it going to lead to the wrong sort of response? I'm curious what you all think about that. Donald Trump over the weekend resumed his boosting of a drug, hydroxychloroquine, a drug that he doesn't understand. He has no knowledge about, but he believes that if he talks about it enough, it can make you either feel better or believe that this isn't so bad. Take some of the pressure off of him for his completely inadequate response in the first months of this pandemic. It's gotten so bad, though, that after, like, going on the stage and talking about this drug, when the doctors are asked about it, here's how he responds. So this is a reporter asking Dr. Fauci at a weekend press conference what he thinks about Trump boosting this drug.
Also weigh in on this issue of hydroxychloroquine. What do you think about this, and what is the medical evidence?
That question?
Yeah. Well,
Maybe 15.
the doctor.
15 times. You don't have to ask.
He's your medical expert, correct?
He's answered that question 15 times.
Dr. Fauci, why are you not wearing a face?
That is Trump jumping in to stop Dr. Fauci from talking about this drug that he's been promoting without knowing anything about it, not seeming to understand the incredibly harsh side effects it can have. So that's the amount of faith he has in this drug that he's touting as a potential wonder cure for coronavirus, is that he won't even let Dr. Fauci talk about it.
But this is the thing, like, does he have shares in this? Do you know what I mean? Does he have insider information that we don't have? Like, why is he continuing to push this other than trying to not contradict himself from a day ago, which he never has a problem with doing anyway? Like, I don't know, like, there's got to be something more sinister going on here. Also, what a mafia move. Such a mafia boss move to just stand and lord over Fauci and be like, no, we're not answering that question. It's awful.
Yeah. I was talking with our producer Edwin earlier today about that, and I think, look, it's possible he's making money or someone is making money, but I think in this case, I think it's just useful to have it out there as a topic to make, because I've seen his fans on Twitter, like, any concern about coronavirus, they answer with, well, what are you worried about? We've got hydroxychloroquine. Like, we're going to be absolutely fine. Like, why are you like, it really does seem to be a one-size-fits-all dodge for any criticism of Donald Trump on this, is that he's the one promoting this drug. Everyone else is trying to stop him. He wants to save us, but they're stopping him, which makes it so that they don't have to focus on the fact that for literally months he did absolutely nothing to prep for this. I think it is almost literally snake oil. And that's not to say that it can't in the end up helping people, or might not, but it's that he doesn't know anything about it, and I don't think he actually cares. I think having it out there as a topic is useful. And we have more video to potentially demonstrate that. Here he is promoting the drug. And look at the language he uses while continually bouncing back and forth and saying it might help, it might not. Here is how he talks about this drug.
That make it. It's a very special thing. Now, it may not work, in which case, hey, it didn't work. And it may work, in which case it's going to save a lot of lives. Now, a lot of people say, if the people walking in prior to getting it, if they take it, it has a profound effect. Well, maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. I don't want to wait a year and a half to find out. And only CNN would ask that question. Fake news. Go ahead.
Sir.
Okay, so, yeah, he gives himself plausible deniability by continually saying, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, maybe it does nothing, but lots of people are telling me that it fixes everyone right up. Who are the people that are telling you? There's a Sean Hannity. It's a Sean Hannity that's telling you that literally every night. And so now, if it ends up not doing anything, he's just going to say, well, I said it might not work. I mean, sure, I boosted it so much that it sold out all around the country. People gobbled up as much as they could. People have already died, including people whose relatives have said it was because of what I said. And he keeps saying, what's the harm? If it doesn't work, then there's no bad result. Well, first of all, people have already died. Second of all, it has known demonstrated side effects, including heart arrhythmia, potentially, when used in the combination of two drugs, erythromycin and hydroxychloroquine, that he's in particular advocating for. And so it's just so dangerous. And I really do think it's about PR. It's about giving some hope so that people won't be as critical of him as the numbers continue to go up.
Right. He's talking about hydroxychloroquine the way that we all talk about, like, gas station penis pills. Or like, maybe they work, maybe they don't, whatever. Just take them.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, except if those could actually kill you instead of just like make your pee turn yellow or whatever they do. I don't know. The thing is, like, Trump, this is all like, he has had circus monkeys before. Now he's had sacrificial lambs. That's what all the people dying for his inaction are. And now he has lab rats. So we've got circus monkeys, sacrificial lambs, and lab rats. He's just collecting all the animals. And that's Americans. Like, seriously, though, he's like, it's okay if you guys are lab rats. We'll test it on Americans because you're going to believe everything I say. And if you die, you know what?
Doesn't hurt him.
At least there was some faith. At least you're right. At least, exactly. He should be at this point. In 2020, he should have been selling penis pills on television. Like, this is Trump's trajectory was just being like selling supplements, like Dana, what was her name? Who's the NRA woman?
The
like
NRA
Dana
one.
Lash.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Dana Lash is comfortably selling beet juice powder right now in infomercials. That is where Trump should have been in the year 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, but look, what he's landed on is the closest thing to snake oil. And again, it's not to say that hypothetically it might not help. It's that he has no idea. He doesn't know anything about this drug or what it does or what the consequences are. And he doesn't have to worry, because if a bunch of people end up dying, honestly, it's not going to hurt him. He talked about it the first time. Within a day, a person was dead. Their wife said he took it because of Trump. Has Fox News acknowledged that? Has a single Trump fan said, well, that was really irresponsible? It hasn't been acknowledged at all. It was the closest, tightest connection imaginable. Like, right. If more people turn up having died, Tucker Carlson's not going to be critical of Trump as a result of it.
Right.
Anyway, I want to play one last video, just because it's ridiculous. So here he is, acknowledging that he's not a doctor while promoting medication and stopping doctors from talking about it.
I've seen things that I sort of like, so what do I know? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor, but I have common sense.
No, he does not have common sense. He is not a doctor, but he's seen things that he likes. And what he likes is that his approval rating is doing okay, and he wants to continue that. And so he has created a show to distract his fans. He's created snake oil to give them hope. Honestly, just go back to like the 1920s and then look up that playbook. And I don't know what else. I don't know what's next, but there's going to be something.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially what got him elected, right? That I will be the vaccine for this system. I'll be the magic pill that will get rid of all the corruption in Washington. Just vote for me. I'm an outsider. And my head is so far up my butt, that I've been insulated from everything. Yeah. So I've got versional ideas. I don't know. The point is he is the snake oil salesman of politicians. He sold himself as a lie, and that's obviously bearing out every single day. And so, of course, he's going to, instead of say, no, we need preparedness, we need the Defense Production Act, I'm taking this very seriously. He's like, no, we need a silver bullet, a magic bullet, and that's it.
Trump has been boosting this drug that, again, he does not understand and doesn't actually care about, and medical professionals are now fighting back. Here is the president, the second largest nurses union in the country, talking about Trump's medical strategy.
Well, first of all, it's embarrassing that we have a president that's acting like a snake oil salesman, trying to peddle his cure that is not proven. You need to get supplies to the proper people. You need to get the N95 masks. You need to get the ventilators to New York City. This is crazy. If the stuff is there, why aren't we seeing it? Why are you putting more stress on everyone involved by not making sure they have what they need? It's unforgivable.
Yeah, I agree. Unforgivable to be putting on this sideshow when the nurses and doctors that people rightfully are holding up as heroes right now, they're telling you exactly what they need. It's not complicated. It's not hard to understand. They need masks. They need gowns. They need ventilators. They need protection and pay for the crazy amount of work that they're doing. All of this has been laid out from the very beginning. They keep reiterating it literally every single day. And instead, he comes up there and he talks to the MyPillow guy, and then he talks about this drug, and then he talks about a company to boost its stock price. And that is not helping the nurses. And so I'm glad that they're striking back against him and labeling him a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to all of the nurses, and I think they are the ones who are on the front lines, if we're going to use wartime analogy. And I hope we come out of this with far more respect and money for nurses and for the public healthcare system, any kind of public healthcare system. But I just want to say that I think that a lot of what Trump is doing is ideological, right? His entire government and the Steve Bannon-esque worldview is that government should be essentially shut down. It should be invaded, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, by pro-business interests, and again, sold for parts. And that's, you've seen in every single person who heads up, any government entity, right? It's like Betsy DeVos in front of, as the head of the Department of Education. Like, all these people don't actually believe in government. And so when you need government, like a global pandemic, a nationwide outbreak, right? They are nowhere to be found. And that is purely ideological. And so I would not be surprised if you asked Jared Kushner or Donald Trump or Steve Mnuchin or Larry Kudlow if they see a problem with companies selling masks and PPE abroad to the highest bidder. Their answer would probably be no, because that's the market value, because they only believe in the market. They don't actually believe in the function of government, which is to protect its people.
Exactly. Yeah. Or selling it domestically for 10, 20, 100 times. I mean, why not? They were fine with insulin, like being jacked up. Well, I guess they can. There's a lot of demand. Why not let them? And the thing is, like, there are the people who are still, I guess, consistent, like Trump, that, you know, and other Republicans, that they didn't care about these sorts of abuses before and they don't care now. There are some people that sort of frustratingly are realizing that, like, people need help now in terms of testing and treatment, but don't believe that should go beyond the bounds of this pandemic. What we need to get to is people who realize that the same sort of, like, deep gut reaction that makes you know that what's going on right now, and that leaving people to their own devices to deal with it is inherently wrong, that should be always active for all of, like, for the pandemics that we don't pay attention to, for the chronic illnesses and things like that. That's what we need to get to. And unfortunately, that still seems like the smallest, like, wedge in that pie.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'm concerned about is, and this is the case that progressives and people on the left and, you know, Democrats are going to have to make, is that when this is over, obviously we're going to be feeling the economic recession and potential depression for many, many, many years. And that can't be an opportunity to accept austerity and accept less by saying, well, the government's broke. We don't have anything. Look at we spent all this money trying to get ventilators, even though we did it so late, right? Like, we're going to be asked to tighten our belts even more, even when people are out of work, even when, we don't know where the next paycheck is coming from, even though we don't know how to afford groceries. So that is something that we can't lose sight of when all of this hopefully is over.
Yeah, it's going to be used to justify the sorts of things that they would have done otherwise and have wanted to do for a long time, like austerity in all areas, unfortunately. And for those of you who are watching the show, I am curious. I mean, Donald Trump, like, from the very beginning, for years and years and years and years and years, has effectively been a combination of a con man and a cult leader more recently. Like, the fact that he's taken up, like, the image of the snake oil salesman, the guy touting, like, a tonic to cure what ails you. Like, is that going to get through to people, or the same people that have never had a problem with it before going to be unconcerned about this?
If you have a heart condition, I understand. Probably you stay away from the Z-Pack. But that's an antibiotic. It can clean out the lungs. The lungs are a point of attack for this horrible virus. But when you have a ventilator, don't ask the answer, because I hate it. If you have it and it's working beautifully, I don't like the answer, because it's not a very high percentage. So I want to keep them out of ventilators. I want to keep them, if this drug works, it will be not a game changer, because that's not a nice enough term. It will be wonderful. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be a gift from heaven if it works. Because when people go into those ventilators, you know the answers, I know the answers, and I'm glad you don't write about it.
So he says there at some point in his weird bedroom talk that, like, don't ask the answers because I don't like it. You know the answers. We rightfully criticize Joe Biden when he goes off the rails in these interviews, but Donald Trump is not only, like, the whole tone was this weird, creepy, like, weird, bizarre tone, but he seemed to forget what he was talking about at multiple points there and started talking about asking answers and you know the answers and you won't write about it. And I honestly, I have no idea what that was.
I think that happens a lot. I think that there's a lot of implicit, Trump just sort of leaves a lot on the table that, like, journalists are like, well, I don't know. What are we talking about? Like, half the time it should be like, what are we talking about, sir? Right? Because he just implies a lot. I feel like he was talking about death. Like, you know that people, I couldn't hear it as well, but I don't know.
Yeah. There's something seriously wrong with him, and it has never been okay, but now the decisions he makes and the decisions he refuses to make, the actions he refuses to take, are deadly in a far more demonstrable fashion than they generally are. He has been responsible for life and death in many cases. We tragically gave him that power as a country, but now we can look, and I can update these coronavirus numbers right now, and we're past 10,000 deaths now. 750 have been reported. It's not even 11 o'clock on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And like, imagine, like, if a country were to try to commit suicide, would it look that different from this, to give one of the dumbest, most dishonest people that our country has ever seen the power to just drag his heels and stop the government from helping people? Like, it's just maddening. That's the thing that has bothered me the most during this lockdown, is to continue to watch how little he has actually evolved on this. And last week, the media was talking about his new tone, and he's more serious. Like the videos we've shown you today, does he seem like he sees this differently, that he's taking it more seriously, that he's grown up, that he's evolved, that he's an adult? Not to me.
No. And you're right. He is a cult leader. He's a snake oil salesman. And back to the ideological drive behind all of this, and believing that the government should be hollowed out and make way for business. This is the problem with having a businessman, a failed businessman, mind you. But this is the problem with having a businessman, whether it's Trump or even Bloomberg, having them be in power. Why? Because they're not concerned about people. They're concerned about profits. And that is not a good model for a government, whether in a pandemic or out of one, because we've been in a slow rolling death spiral for a long time when it comes to, government services and people being able to make ends meet. So let this be a lesson. And for everyone who's got a Trump voter in their family, please reach out to them. Obviously, check in how they're doing, make sure they're self-quarantining, but also like, hey, how's that whole businessman being in power working out for you? You know?
Yeah. How about, like, okay, we tried running the government like a business.
Right.
Let's try running it like a Norway. Let's run it like a Denmark. How about that? It's not a business, but the people are happy, and that probably means something.
Yes.
From the beginning, as coronavirus began to spread around the country, unfortunately, some groups did not take it quite seriously enough, and it seems like there are still some significant holdouts in certain religious communities. Here is some video from CNN of them interviewing a woman who had just come from a church service.
Driving out of this Ohio parking lot is a woman who just attended a church service with dozens of other people, including children.
Can I ask you about your decision to go to church, to be inside that building?
I wouldn't be anywhere else.
Aren't you concerned you could infect other people if you get sick inside?
No.
People who don't go to this church?
No. I'm covered in Jesus' blood. I'm covered in Jesus'
blood. What about other people who don't go to this church who you might encounter?
All of these people go to this church.
No, but you're going to be in places where other people
I go to the grocery store every day. I'm in Walmart, Home Depot, all of those
people. But you could get them sick from what happens
They could get me sick, but they're not, because I'm covered in his blood. Thank you very much.
So look, I don't want to attack any individual person. I'm not here to attack the woman. But that was madness.
I am.
Okay, then we go to Francesca.
No, but I will say that usually when you say I'm covered in his blood, someone should call the cops on you, because that's how that works. You don't just get to drive away. I'm covered in his blood. Thank you. Like you need to be arrested. But it's so scary. It's absolutely awful. And I think the scariest part to me was when she was talking about going to Walmart and Home Depot. And as we know, Walmart workers have been absolutely horribly impacted by this. I believe 2 of them died last week, late last week. I think it was in Illinois, but they are not given the proper PPE. They are not given paid sick leave. They're every single day being asked to put their lives on the line. And the Walton family, we know, is one of the notoriously most corrupt, greedy corporations and families that doesn't, even encourages their employees to go on food stamps, for example. And that was the scariest part to me, is like, yeah, these are the fanatics who are going to be the super spreaders in this pandemic.
Yeah, she has inoculated herself, not from the virus, but from the advice of medical professionals. And so she goes to Walmart, do you think she's wearing a mask? Do you think she's wearing gloves? Like, she's covered in blood.
Covered in blood.
In a good way. And so if she starts to feel symptoms, she's not going to believe that she actually has it. She can't get it. She's protected, by the blood or whatever. And so potentially it's spread to other people. And the thing is, again, it's not about her. She was at a place where there were tons of people spreading it to each other and then potentially going out and spreading it to other people. When she was asked directly about the fact that she might get people sick, that they might die as a result of her actions, she just did a little circular thing and evaded responsibility. She just left a religious service, and when told that she might kill a person, she now believes that's not something that I have to worry about. I went to church. I did the good thing. I don't need to protect other people's lives. What a sick perversion of basically every holy text of every major religion in the world.
Yeah,
and I
just
believe that.
Yeah, and I think that she's not representative of the majority of Christians, and I
not
feel
at
like
all.
A lot of the people, the extremist religious fundamentalists in power, like Mike Pence, who, in my mind, part of me is like, well, maybe Mike Pence would be better. No, Mike Pence believes in Old Testament plagues. That's exactly what's going on right now. Like, the guy is definitely building an ark in his backyard. He is fine with this. Like, he believes all of this. All of this is part of God's plan. That is the type of dangerous religious fundamentalist Christianity that is in power, that doesn't represent the majority of Christians, I think, in this country, but it perfectly aligns with the pig-headedness of like MAGA believers, because essentially Trump is their messiah as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is a minority position amongst Christians, but it is a group that is being told to be this way. There's probably a lot of overlap with the Trump supporters anyway, but that's what's so, like, there's always going to be groups in America that don't believe scientists, don't believe academics, that don't trust experts. I get that. But when you have groups that are being told every day not to do that their priest or whatever is telling them not to trust these people, that it's all fake news, when their media is telling them, when the cult leader that is their president is telling them, it's like, how can you expect them to get beyond this? They're regular people that are struggling with their lives, and everyone that they trust and love tells them that they're being lied to. And some of them will die as a result of that. That is such a tragedy. And it's really fast. It's not just that woman. So this one event that was held, this is by the Reverend Tony Spell of Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge. About 1,200 people attended an event. Some bussed in, others driving more than 100 miles to attend. Spell has previously told CNN he believes the pandemic is politically motivated. He also said, "We don't get our rights to worship freely from the government. We get those from God. We'd rather obey God than man." So, and by the way, what this is referring to is the fact that many of these religious leaders are being told in some states not to hold these events, and they're just doing it anyway. In others, these religious events are being classified as essential, so they can go on as if they were grocery stores or pharmacies, packing hundreds or indeed thousands of people into a tiny area, ensuring transmission of the virus between them.
My God, literally. I mean, this is the thing, though, is like, I think we all know where God is in this moment. Like, God is telling us to stay the F home. Like, God is the one infecting all kinds of people, no matter like who you are, where you're from, what you believe, what party, you vote for. Like, God is speaking very loud and clear. And I don't believe in God, but I definitely believe, I don't know what I believe in the universe. No, the point is that like
a religious awakening live on the Damage Report.
Exactly. And it is absolutely irresponsible. I think pastors and priests are often like leaders in their community. So it's even scarier that, they're continuing to allow people to congregate. And I feel like that's indicative of maybe their general outlook anyway. And like, the snake oil that some religious leaders sell on a daily basis, if I can say so.
Yeah. And we've got one more. So this is from televangelist Jonathan Shuttlesworth, who said, "If you're putting out pamphlets and telling everybody to use Purell before they come into the sanctuary, you should just turn in your ministry credentials and burn your church down. You're a loser. Bunch of pansies. No balls. Got neutered somewhere along the line and don't even realize it." He then announced his own plans to host a Woodstock-like, quote, Easter blowout service. So I keep saying that I'm eventually going to write a book about how conservative masculinity teaches men to be so terrified of being labeled weak that they end up being both dumb and weak. And this is the perfect example of that. It's you're
Write
weak
that book.
if you protect yourself from disease. Instead, you should be constantly worried about if other people think that you're man enough. And you should probably also die of coronavirus. That is masculinity for conservatives.
No, and on a serious note, like, I guess I just want to say to people who are like, well, I'm young and maybe I'm like healthy and fit, like, we don't know that this can't affect you as well. Like, I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm really strong and I've got good health, so I'm not at risk for this. And you absolutely still are at risk for this virus. And not only that, you can spread it to other people. And so there's a little bit of what we're all doing is like, well, yeah, well, I whatever, drink muscle milk and go to the gym. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't. And you can take, if you do get sick, it can take a turn for the worse. It can take a bad turn just because you have a fever. Look at Chris Cuomo. That dude lifts
constantly. He gets after it.
Seriously. Like, he's got 20 pounders or 50, I don't know, whatever heavy is under his desk at CNN.
10, like 10, maybe a little burn after 10.
Listen, I'm the person that goes into the gym with like a little fiver and is like, ugh.
Hey, if that works, use it.
It works.
Okay, so for those of you who are watching at home, I am curious. Like, we're talking about how some states are still allowing it. Florida, by the way, and other states allowing church services during the pandemic. So what should they do? Should they shut it down? I mean, look, I think that they should, to save those people's lives and to also protect everyone else who will come into contact with them. But I also acknowledge that they would be attacked for, shutting down people's religious freedom and all that stuff. Like, there are already gun stores that are like suing over Second Amendment violations for the fact that some places have not labeled them essential. I imagine that the worshipers would probably end up doing the same.
And I just want to say, like, this is the thing. Like, guess what? It's part of my religious, freedom to help other people. Like, my religion is actually helping nurses and caretakers and being in solidarity with the most vulnerable, like Jesus probably would have done.
Yeah.
So, like, all this religious liberty, like BS language has always been used to mostly discriminate, and also to be sort of defiantly ignorant and openly ignorant. And we're seeing that right now.
Right now, Joe Biden, as well as a number of people not in the Democratic primary, are pressuring Bernie Sanders to drop out, and certainly not to have anything like debates or anything like that. Regrettably, this weekend, Larry David called for Bernie Sanders to drop out. So we go now to Hillary Clinton. Back in a previous election that she was running in, what did she think about calls for candidates to drop out before they believed their path to the nomination was closed?
Honestly, I just believe that this is the most important job in the world. It's the toughest job in the world. You should be willing to campaign for every vote. You should be willing to debate anytime, anywhere. I think it's an interesting juxtaposition where we find ourselves. And, I have been willing to do all of that during the entire process. And people have been trying to push me out of this ever since Iowa. And I find that... I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I find it curious because it is unprecedented in history. I don't understand it. And, between my opponent and his camp and some in the media, there has been this urgency to end this. And, historically that makes no sense. So I find it a bit of a mystery.
You don't buy the party unity argument?
I don't, because, again, I've been around long enough. My husband did not wrap up the nomination in 1992 until he won the California primary somewhere in the middle of June, right? We all remember Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in June in California. I don't understand it. And, there's lots of speculation about why it is, but...
What's your speculation?
I don't know. I find it curious.
Okay, so there's a lot of issues there. But you should be willing to fight for every vote. You should be able to debate every debate. I'm sure she's telling that to Joe Biden on the phone right now. But why would you be pushed out before at least mid-June, maybe? So, according to that, we've still got a couple months potentially of Bernie Sanders fighting for every vote, engaging in every debate, pushing for the policies that he thinks the country needs. And, we put this out here as if people are going to realize the hypocrisy of what they're doing, but I have a feeling that's probably not going to happen.
No, and I mean, she did even mention that, like, Bobby Kennedy was killed in June, right? During his run.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, which, I mean, these are morbid, like, scenarios playing out. But again, I do think if we have two septuagenarians, people in their 70s, running in this race, we should keep them in for as long as possible, because there is a killer virus that is like just glomming on to the elderly. So listen, stay in the race. And again, like, if Clinton were running right now, she would absolutely still be in the race. I have no doubt that she would be in the race. If she was trailing, she would stay in it. And I just want to say to those folks who think that, like, this is not democracy, or that's, somehow, like, sorry, that, like, Bernie should drop out because we have to pull together and like, get behind Biden. That isn't democracy. That actually, if you're scared, I will remind you that in 2016, Bernie was there at the convention. Hillary was there at the convention. There was, like, good tension between both camps. There wasn't, like, animosity. No one was, like, hurting each other. There was, like, a healthy tension. It's almost like a democratic tension. And that, I think, is important. We're going to need that if we actually are ever going to make any change in this country. You're going to need people pushing from the outside. And of course, I think coming together to avoid what will absolutely be, I don't know, the next ring of hell, if we can get there with 4 more years of Trump. But until that point, I think it's important to actually maintain healthy dialogue and tension and debate. And Bernie should absolutely stay in the race.
Yeah. And the concerns about party unity, she said she doesn't buy that. You never know what could happen, as you pointed out. Super morbid. And I remember at the time I didn't like her raising that, because it seemed like she was sort of implying, hey, Obama could get assassinated in the next 2 months, which seems like a really weird thing. Yeah, anything's possible. We live in America where, at least half the country harbors fantasies of potentially killing the opposition politicians. That doesn't mean we should necessarily be talking about it, but this is a pandemic after all. So if she believed that, then she must think there's potentially health reasons that this thing might not be wrapped up. And anyway, and I would say even more importantly, one of the reasons I want to talk about this was to plug my recent op-ed in The Hill, which came out yesterday. And it is, does Joe Biden even really want to become president? And I look at the evidence as to whether he actually wants to be president. And I think that him wanting to shut down debates and effectively wrap this thing up proves that he doesn't. Because we're in a time right now where, look at our rundown. 95% of the news is about coronavirus, okay? That means that normally the presidential candidate would be talked about a lot. That's not going to happen right now. Literally, the only way that they're going to get any coverage on a week-to-week basis is with debates, with primaries that will draw a little bit of attention to the Democratic side. If they shut it down, there will be nothing. You will hear virtually nothing about Joe Biden, if he's the nominee, for the next 3 or 4 months. How can he possibly hope to win when no one is talking about him? If you believe that you're the candidate, if you believe that you have the right policies, get on the stage with Bernie Sanders, or virtually. They can do it by Zoom or whatever, and debate him, and at least you'll get some attention to your side. You will have a fighting chance to win. But he doesn't want to do that, and that proves to me that maybe he'd like to be president, but he doesn't want to fight to become president. He's not willing to do even the normal thing that we do every 4 years to become the nominee.
Exactly. And I also just want to add, yes, John, let's all read John's op-ed in The Hill and share it widely. And also all of the centrist Democrats who were running for president and then endorsed Joe Biden, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Cory Booker, Andrew Yang, like, where are they? Are they stumping for him on Zoom? Like, where have they been? That's a good question. If they believe that Joe Biden is the best chance at beating Trump, I want to hear from them every single day to make their case. I haven't heard him at all.
Breaking news here, live on the Damage Report. Wisconsin has delayed in-person voting amid the coronavirus outbreak. I am reading that as of literally just a few minutes ago. In-person voting is going to be delayed until June 9th. Governor Evers had apparently directed the Republican-led legislature to take a proposal to block in-person voting. They declined because they too are ghouls. And so anyway, via executive order, they are going to be delaying it. And so while some people are literally doing voting today, it seemed like the not in-person day of voting, it looks like the actual date will now be pushed back in line with a number of other states.
Yeah, that is so relieving, but also very, very late in the game. I know Ohio pulled something very similar, which was the right move to not have people go out and vote the day of. But there is already a lot of lack of information. And so I wonder if, the voters in Wisconsin will be able to, will know that they actually don't have voting tomorrow, right? And not have to risk themselves unnecessarily. Do they still have mail-in voting, I hope, or are still accepting ballots? I guess we have to read further in the article because it's breaking news. But yeah, that's what we should be doing. Let's get the hottest day of summer. Everyone go to the polls. It should just be based on the weather that week. If it's going to be 90 and above, we're going to the polls. Coronavirus has a hard time staying alive in that amount of heat, and that is correct. Fauci told me. So it makes sense. I mean, they've postponed the DNC, right? The convention won't be until August.
Yeah, and might be virtual, according to Joe Biden. And by the way, the reason I found out about that breaking news was because of Jules in the chat. And so everyone who is spreading news in the chat, thank you. That's how we keep up on what's going on while we're live. So Jules, this story goes out to you. Really fast, by the way. So they're doing the delay, which is great. I agree. Man, they waited till last moment. I'm reading they were thinking about telling people on Friday, but they decided, we'll give them a couple extra days before they do it. No, I'm kidding. That's but anyway, it wouldn't make any sense. The election would be over. But yeah, I worry. Will everyone find out about this? And by the way, quote, Republicans are expected to immediately challenge the governor's order in state court. So let's be very clear about that. The Republicans are challenging the governor's executive order to, I guess, get more people to vote in pandemic conditions in a Democratic primary. Yes. The Republicans are challenging to force Democrats to potentially get sick and die. Right. That's America, baby, right there.
I mean, yeah, but listen, Trump also has someone challenging him in the primary. Mm-hmm. He's got that weird name that I can't remember right now, but I've been making fun of it for a very long time. And now it's I don't know what it is. It's something I don't remember. It's something like superpower cauliflower. Like it's something really funny.
That sounds awesome.
Superpower cauliflower is a very good board game that we have to invent.
We do. We need to work on that. By the way, Wisconsin, as of right now, has 2,440 coronavirus infections and 77 deaths. 9 new deaths in just reported so far today. So thank you, Governor Evers, for doing this. Should have done it earlier, but this will hopefully save some lives. For as long as America has been a country, we have been supportive of some truly reprehensible world leaders, and you've probably heard many times throughout your life that we get involved with some of these countries despite proclaiming that what we are pushing for is more democracy across the world. So what exactly is causing that disconnect, and what forms does it take at present? We are joined by David Swanson, Executive Director of World Beyond War and the author of 20 Dictators the U.S. Currently Supports. David, welcome to the Damage Report.
Hi, John. Good to be here.
Very glad to have you on. Excited, honestly, in these days to talk about anything that doesn't have to do with the worldwide spread of disease. And you've got a book that came out quite recently, actually. Can you tell me a little bit about what led to you wanting to write this analysis of the current dictators that we're supportive of?
Well, I'm not a big fan of war lies, and whenever there's a need for a new war or a coup in Venezuela or overthrowing the government of Syria or blaming a horrible election on Russia, we hear about foreign dictators. And when Donald Trump meets with a dictator in North Korea, or Bernie Sanders says something that's not 100% negative about a ruler in Cuba, we hear dictator, dictator, dictator. And so I wanted to look at, because it occurred to me that the usual pattern with dictators for the U.S. government was to arm them and train them and fund them. So I wanted to look in some detail. Was that really the case, or was the U.S. government actually maintaining a distance from some dictators so that this outrage about North Korea or Cuba actually made sense?
So in the book, you talk about 20. So just to be clear, is that an all-encompassing list, or are these 20 sort of emblematic cases that you're talking about? But arguably, you could have included others?
Well, a lot of the studies that are done are that rank governments in terms of their brutality and their oppression and their violation of human rights don't distinguish dictatorships from other forms of government. So, in fact, I looked at a list of 50 oppressive governments and looked at how the U.S. government dealt with them and found that 82% of them, the U.S. government arms them, 88% it trains their militaries, 64% it funds their militaries. It supports in some way 96% of them. And then I narrowed it down to 20 that could be called dictatorships because they're really dominated by a single individual. And it's not science. You could argue reasonably that there were a few more I should have counted as dictatorships, or there were a couple I shouldn't have counted as dictatorships. But these are 20 that are pretty solidly dictatorships and clearly supported by the U.S. government.
And what are some of the countries that have made your list?
Well, without giving the whole list, so maybe a couple people buy the book. That's
the goal.
I think you can start through the alphabet, right? The King of Bahrain, the Sultan of Brunei, the president, so-called, of Egypt, but who has declared emergency powers over and over, giving himself the role of dictator. These are people who, if wars were really motivated by the desire to attack dictators, these guys, all 20 of them would make wonderful propaganda. I mean, the hideousness of their crimes, their endless lists of political prisoners and torture victims, and the outrageousness of their excessive wealth, and the incredible waste and consumption by these people and their families would just make beautiful propaganda if the U.S. military were interested, as it may be someday, in attacking some of these countries.
So you talk about around the book that it'll be extremely difficult for someone to read the book and still believe that one of the principal causes of intervention by the U.S. in other countries is actually what they say it is, which is to promote democracy. So tell me a little bit about that, because I'm curious, do you believe that in some cases there are people in government that actually do believe that is a goal, or is that always a cover? Is it just convenient, or are they falling short of an actual mission that they have? I'm curious what you think what you think is underlying all of that.
Well, a government like the U.S. government has many thousands of people in it who believe all variety of things, and many go into governments with the best intentions, which is how some of them become whistleblowers and how some of them do some good from within a government. But if you look at the U.S. relationship to dictatorships, almost all of them, the U.S. government funds and arms and trains their militaries. This is not some, few bad apples carefully selected by me. This is the rule. I mean, the only exceptions are the designated enemies, the North Koreas, the Irans, etc. So to think that the wars are actually motivated by a desire to attack dictatorships is absurd. And almost every dictatorship that has been attacked in a U.S. war was previously supported, if not empowered, if not put in place by the U.S. government. And if you look at where wars happen, there are factors that do correlate with where wars happen, including the presence of fossil fuels, but not the presence of dictatorship. I mean, the U.S. is partnering in a war right now that hasn't stopped with one of the most brutal dictatorships on earth, Saudi Arabia, and several others in bombing the people of Yemen. So it's almost the opposite. I mean, a number of these dictatorships in this list of 20, in fact, host U.S. military bases and sell the U.S. oil and are otherwise allies of the United States. So this is not, they're not somehow future targets waiting because the United States hates dictatorships.
Yeah. And you talked about some of the ways that we're supportive of them, not just in terms of rhetoric, but actual like financial and military support, which obviously can be a lot of money. I'm curious, as an anti-war advocate, how do you think that we and potentially viewers could get involved in trying to put pressure on cutting ties with some of these horrible regimes?
Well, universities across the United States are funded by brutal dictatorships, kingdoms from the Middle East and Asia, and shouldn't be. And we should divest those institutions from that money. So-called progressive think tanks like the Center for American Progress, the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, and dozens of others funded by dictators like that of the United Arab Emirates. There ought to be shame involved in these relationships. There's actually legislation introduced by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in the U.S. Congress, House Resolution 5880, called the Stop Arming Human Rights Abusers Act, which simply says stop selling weapons to the worst human rights abusers. Now, as an anti-war activist, I find it a little absurd because I don't know how you use weapons of war without violating human rights. But nonetheless, I think passing this bill would be a huge step forward.
You mentioned in the description of the book, by the way, that there's one thing that ties together many of these dictators is what you term glorious goofiness. Can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, these are people who you've seen posters of some of their possessions with mottos like "He who dies with the most toys wins." I mean, these are people with thousands of specialized automobiles, rotting away in their collections. People like the president of Tajikistan, who John Oliver did a whole 20-minute video making fun of him, of how he'll, enter a car race and they'll make sure he quote unquote wins. Entered a horse race and he just about won, but did a face plant, and yet not one word from John Oliver about the fact that the U.S. military is arming and training and funding his military. That's what I want to enter into U.S. discourse. But yeah, if these people were targets of propaganda, if they were the next place for a coup or sanctions or a war, the material is just extremely rich.
I'm curious, too, about the different forms that support for these dictators can come in, because, many of the cases that you talk about in your book, these are not new relationships. There are some that go back, many, many decades. So Donald Trump, obviously, in terms of a sort of like personal relationship with dictators, seems to have gone above and beyond in terms of the fondness he expresses for them and that sort of thing. Past rulers don't necessarily write letters to these dictators, but give billions of dollars, to their militaries. Do you believe that Trump's form of support for dictators, in the more sort of personal friendship, does that matter in any way? Or is it just surface on something that's been a very similar problem for a long time?
I think it matters. I think it's reprehensible. I think it's dangerous. I think it's impeachable. I think it's also important that we know that it's not completely brand new, that, not only are dictatorships doing business with Trump's businesses, but dictatorships were giving huge donations to the Clinton Foundation, which the Secretary of State Clinton was then waiving bans on selling weapons to those dictatorships. So the personal interests of politicians in D.C. Is one factor, like the corporate media, like the funding of universities and think tanks and so on, that creates this situation. But to have a U.S. president talking like a dictator, clearly wanting to be a dictator, admiring foreign dictators openly, yeah, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with a lot of things Donald Trump does.
Well, we certainly share that. The book is 20 Dictators Currently Supported by the U.S., and you did a great job of not giving too many details on them. I'm sure there's a lot more. How exactly did you determine a glorious goofiness in there? So everyone is going to want to definitely take a look at that. And, David, we really appreciate you joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.